Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how to play Naishi. Naishi is a two-player tableau building hand management game that I created with my friend Alex Fortino that we made for Merle Edition. It's only their second game after Chocotte, but this time we're going to be talking about feudal Japan. The game is set to be released in September, but seeing as it's on Board Game Arena now, it's in alpha, beta stages. I wanted to show you guys how to play so that you can enjoy it on Board Game Arena as well. So the material I'm going to be showing to you today is not final. It's stuff that I printed out, but every illustration that you see is final. Illustrations were made by Marine Lescout. Naishi is the first game that she actually illustrated straight out of university. Very talented girl. You can go see her Instagram. I'm going to put it up here somewhere. So I'm going to start by giving you the key elements of the game, and then we're going to go on to the setup, and I'm going to show you how to play. So the first important thing to note is you're going to find three types of cards in this game. The mountain cards, which you're going to start with, they're the worst cards in the game. Then there's development cards, which are cards you're going to get from the river from the beginning of the game, but they're the cards you're going to be drafting during the game. And there's two types of these cards. There's the character cards, which have a rectangle around their icon, and there's the province cards, which have a hexagon around it. That's going to be very important to note because you're going to be scoring points from these cards. The characters are going to score themselves. That means every character card is going to give points for themselves, whereas province cards are collection cards. So that means you're going to have to look in your whole tableau, how many do you have, and then refer to this little chart on the bottom to see how many points they score you. Another important thing to note in Naishi is you have three play areas. You've got your line, which is the cards that are in front of the river. Then you have the river, where you have cards you're going to be drafting from, and you have your hand. So those are three, when I'm going to be talking in this video about your line or your hand or the river, these are the places that I'm talking about. Of course, seeing as it's a two-player game, your opponent has the same thing. He has the river, his line, and of course his hand of 5 cards. Now in Naishi, you're going to be developing your land by taking cards from the river and making your either your hand or your line better, so that at the end of the game, when you put your hand down in front of your line, you have a grid of 5x2 cards, so 10 cards, and you're going to score those cards, and depending on their positioning and what's touching them and what's adjacent, you're going to make combos and better points. The player at the end who has the most points will win. That's not very original, but that's how it is. The last key concept that you need to keep in mind is that your hand or your line or any card you have, you can never change or freely change the position of them. So I can't say, for example, I'm going to change this card and put it over there. No, you can't. You got to keep them as they are, and you're going to have to do a special action if you want to be able to move them. But you can't freely reorganize your hand. Now, to set up the game, each player is going to choose a color. Now, this is my prototype, so the official tokens are going to be black and white to represent go. And so the black player will always be the first player for the first game. If you do multiple games, you can switch, alternate for first player. But anyways, both players are going to take those emissary tokens of their color. They're going to place the Imperial Court board between them. They're going to place out 5 mountain cards to be on your line, 5 mountain cards to be on the other player's line, and then there's going to be 6 mountain cards remaining. You give 3 to each player. Then you take all of the development cards, you give them a good shuffle. You're going to give 2 to each player for the initial setup. So give 2 that you, of course, don't show to the other players. And then you're going to divide all the remaining cards into 5 piles. So it should give you 6 draw piles. Once you've distributed all these cards, flip over the first one, the top card from these piles. Then you're going to look at the 2 cards that you were given at the beginning of the game. You're going to keep one for yourself. It's just a mini draft to start the game. You're going to keep one for yourself and give the other one to your opponent. They're going to do the same thing. So you're going to end up with 2 development cards and your 3 mountain cards from the beginning initial setup. You're going to give them a good shuffle 2 or 3 times. And then once that's done, you're going to simply open your hand, and that is your initial setup. So in Naishi, in a normal turn, you're going to do one of 4 things that are obligatory. So you have to do one of these 4 things. The first thing is to do a development action. It's the main thing you're going to be doing, so I'm going to explain that first. But then the second thing that you can do is to recall your emissaries. The third thing you can do is to impose a Imperial Decree. And the last thing you can do is to declare the end of game. I'll go over these in a second, but first I want to start with the development action because like I said, it's the one you're going to be doing 90% of the time. So now let's look at the development action because like I said, you're going to be doing it 90% of the time, and especially on your first turn, you have no choice to do this. So if you do a development action, you're going to have to take a card from the river and place it onto your line or into your hand. Now, what's very important is you got to respect the positioning of that card. So for example, here, I could take this card, and if I want it, I'd have to put it either here or here in my hand at that same position and replace the card that was there. So that card would be discarded. You just take it out of the game, put it wherever you want, and then you would flip over the new card and it would be your opponent's turn. So very important, like I said, you have to respect the positioning. I couldn't take this card, for example, and put it all the way over here or over there. No, you always got to respect that same position. So once you've played your development action, you have the possibility of sending one of your emissaries onto one of these two spaces. Now, it's something I could do before or after doing my development action. I'll give you an example of this. The main one that we have here is the changing action. So the rotation, if we will. This one has 3 spots because it's mostly what players are going to be doing. What this allows you to do is to inverse the position of 2 cards, whether on the river, in the line, on your hand, or between your hand and your line. So how would I do this? Let's say before I do my development action, I could say, well, you know what? I'm going to do this here. I'm going to flip these 2. I'm going to change their position, and then I'm going to do my development action like this. Again, I could also decide to do that after my development action. So maybe I'll say, okay, well, I want this card, so I'm going to take it in my hand, but I don't want it to be there. I want it to be next to the Torii gate. So again, you can do this before or after your development action. You can't do it twice. You couldn't say I did it before and again after. It's only once per turn. Now, the second bonus action that's down here is you could send an emissary to kind of clean up the river. So you could say, I'm going to go here and take away 2 cards from 2 of the draw piles. It can't be twice the same one. So let's say I decide to take away this one and this one. I don't want the purples there. I don't want them to be there. So I would do this before my development action because let's say, oh, I think there's nothing good here for me. And now I could take my development action and take this Naishi card, or I could decide to do it after. Now you might be wondering, why would you want to do it after? Well, let's say I just played. I'm going to take this as a good example. Let's say this Naishi's flipped over. Let's say this card was here. I decide to take it in my hand. And so I reveal the top card, and the top card is the Naishi, which is, you know, it's the name of the game. So of course it's the best card in the game. So I don't want my opponent to get this card. So I could decide to kill, I don't know, these 2 cards so that he doesn't have access to that card. So what I just showed you there is 90% of what you're going to be doing in the game. You're going to be taking cards, moving their position, changing, taking some away, not giving them to your opponents. That's mostly what you're going to be doing. You just heard me say you can take back those emissary tokens. Well, that is also one of your choices of an obligatory action. If you don't want to do a development action, you could say, I'm not going to play my turn. I'm simply going to recall my emissary tokens so that they are available for a following turn. So again, let's say it's my turn to play. My opponent just played. I look at the hand, I look at everything, and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm not going to do anything this turn. I'm simply going to take my tokens back. And then it would be again my opponent's turn. I couldn't, of course, play a turn and then decide to take them back. That you can't do. Also, you could decide to recall your emissaries even if they're not both deployed. I could say, okay, my opponent just played. It's my turn. You know what? I'm not going to play. I'm going to take this one back because I'm going to need it for a following turn. The third option you have is to do an Imperial Decree. Now, what does that mean? It essentially means you can steal somebody's card. Now, if you decide to do an Imperial Decree, I know it's on the Imperial Court board, but it's not an additional action. This is, instead of playing, I'm not going to develop, I'm not going to take any cards, I'm going to place my token up here, and I'm going to steal a card from my opponent. So if I do this, I'm going to place my token up here, and I'm going to exchange a card from my line to my opponent's line in the same positioning. Again, we're respecting that axe. You could also exchange from your hand to your opponent's hand. One thing you couldn't do is to trade from your hand to the line of your opponent. You got to respect that same positioning. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, but stealing is so unfair. I don't like games that steal, and then that's so mean. But actually, it's not that advantageous to steal. It's really a question of timing. Why? Let's go back and I'll show you. If you see here on this board, of course you can't see, you're too high up, but I'm going to put it on the screen. There's a little lock symbol here, a little padlock. That means that the player who does the steal, it'll only happen once a game if it happens, but it'll only happen once a game. And if it does, that player loses that emissary for the rest of the game. So let's say on a following turn, I decide I'm not going to play, I'm going to take my emissaries back. I would only take back one. So yes, of course it's devastating to get your card stolen, but know that now from now on, the red player is going to be a lot more mobile and agile in what he's going to be doing. He's going to have more options. The yellow player will constantly be stuck with not having his emissaries. And finally, the last option that you have as an obligatory action, if you don't want to develop, you don't want to take back your emissaries, you don't want to steal because either it's already been done, you can declare the end of the game. Now, speaking of that, I haven't told you when the game ends, so let's look at that. Whenever one of the 5 draw piles is empty, okay? Not if you empty it, but on the following turn, so this one, my opponent just emptied this pile, I could decide to say, I'm not going to play my turn, and I declare the end of the game. Now, whether you were first player or not, your opponent's going to have a final turn that they can play, that they must play, sorry. They're going to play that turn, and once that's done, we're going to lay down our cards and count our points. The second way that a game could end is, let's say it's my turn to play. I decide to take this card here, and by taking this, I reveal, so I empty a second draw pile. At this point, it's not a question of who wants to stop. It's immediately you end game. Now, you're going to still finish the turn. So if I was the first player, my opponent would have one last turn. If I was the second player, well, I just ended the game. We count our points. So you can see that that was the last obligatory action. You could decide to not play and say, I'm going to end game if there's one draw pile that's empty. So now I'm going to show you guys what the cards do and how they score points. So I'm going to start with the mountain card. If at the end of the game in your play area, you only have one mountain card, it's worth 5 points. If you have 2 or more, they're all worth -5. So in this case, I mean, this would be a terrible game if this is what happened, but let's just say this was the case, they all would give me -5. Not each of them would give me -5, but for my whites, I would have -5, okay? So in total here, I'd have -5 plus the points from this purple, and that would be it. Be careful. I've seen some people in the past think that this would be -5, -5, -5. That would be crazy, okay? That's not the case. It's for the totality of your white cards, you get -5. Next, we have the Naishi, which is the best card of the game. She will only score points if she's in the middle column of your play area. So if she's up here, she'll be worth 12, and down here, she'll be worth 8. The next card we have is the Counselor. The Counselor, of course, wants to be close to his Naishi. So he's going to be worth a different amount of points depending on where he's placed in your line or in your hand. On the extremities, he'll be worth 2 points, then 4 points, then 3 points, and then 4 and 2 again. So why is it like that? Well, because optimally, he would be surrounding his Naishi. So in this case, he's worth 4 points here, 4 points there, and they have an adjacency bonus of 4 points for touching a Naishi. So in this case, both of them are worth 8 points. Next, we've got these guard towers that wants to be on the extremities of your play area. So if it's down here, for example, anywhere on these 6 areas, it would be worth 0 points. But if you have them in the extremities, it's worth 6 points per card that you have. So if I would have 2, they would be worth 12 points. Again, not per card because these are province cards. So for the totality, I would have 12 points. There's a nice combo to be had with the next card, the Sentinel card. So the Sentinel card does not want to be adjacent to another Sentinel card. So if you're down here, that's fine. But if you're up here, they would both cancel each other out. So they'd be worth 0 points. Now, if you're down here, for example, it would be worth 3 points, 3 points, and they get an adjacency bonus of 4 points if they're touching the brown cards, the guard tower. Now, one thing I didn't mention prior to this, if you have a card that is canceled, you still get its adjacency bonus. So let's say in this case, if I had the 2 green cards next to each other, they would be worth 0 points for their initial value, but their adjacency bonus would still count. So this would be worth 0, but this one here, I would get 4 points from being adjacent to the guard tower. Following this, we have the Torii gates. So the Torii gates, there's 4 of them in the game, and your goal is going to be to try to get at least 3. If you have only 1 in your game at the end of a play, you're going to have -5 points. If you have 2, that's worth 0 points. But if you can get 3 or 4, they're worth 30 points. So it's very valuable if you can get that third one to get a boost on your opponent. A card that combos very well with this is the monk, who of course is attached to that those religious sites, those torii gates. So he's going to be worth 5 points only if he's in your hand. So if he's on the bottom of your play area at the end, if he's up here, he would be worth 0 points. And on top of that, he's going to get a +2 bonus per adjacency to the torii gates. So in this case, he would be worth 5 +2 +2 +2, 11 points. Following this, we have the rice field. So the rice field is a collection, set collection, where you're trying to get the most adjacent cards. So you can zigzag like this, and the goal is to get 4 is the maximum amount that you can get. So if I have my cards like this, for example, if I have only 2, it would be worth 10 points, 3 is worth 20, and if you have 4 or more, because there's a 5th one, but the 5th one doesn't give you any points. But anyways, having 4 would give you 30 points. Then we have the bannerman and his banner. So these cards, as you can see from the illustration, are cards that go together. You have 2 of each in the game, and one is a character card and one is a province card. So if you were to have both of these banners, they would be worth 8 points total, and if you only had 1, it'd be worth 3 points. So you get a little bonus for having 2. And then if you have the horseman on the bottom, the bannerman, he's worth 3 points. Of course, he can only be scored if he's under in your play area. And so he's worth 3 points. If you have these 2 cards touching, you get an adjacency bonus of 10 points. So this total here, if you had this set, would be worth 3 + 3 + 10, so 16 points for these 2 cards, so can be very valuable. And now to finish out this explanation, we've got 2 very special cards. So we got one that's the Ronin and one that's the Ninja, and they work in very special ways, so we're going to look at those now. The Ronin is a character that is advantaged by being surrounded by different cards. So at the end of the game, you're going to look in your play area, how many different colors or how many different symbols do you have in your game. He only scores if you have at least 8, 9, or 10. Now there's only 10 different colors and symbols in the game. So if you can optimize him, he can be one of the better cards in the game. Now, very important to note that for this character, and that's what we see on this card, is that he only scores cards that have the rectangle or the hexagon in the corner. So these 2 cards do not count. Of course, black and white are not necessarily considered to be colors, so that's how that works. So let's say I were to score this area right now. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. He himself does count as a color. So there you have 5, 6. This one we've already counted it, 7 and 8. So I would get 8 points for having 8 different cards. You can imagine that he's very valuable once you get to 9 or 10. 8 is kind of just, pity points. But if I were to have this, so if I were to have every single color in the game, well, that would be very valuable because he's worth 45 points. Now, of course, depending on where you place your other cards, they might all be worthless, so that might not help. But if you can optimize this hand, that's what will give you the high score of the game. And so finally, the last one we have here is the Ninja. Now, the Ninja will stealthily copy a character that you have in your hand. Very important, this little symbol here that we have on both of these cards really represents in your play area. So this Ninja can only copy a rectangle character from your game. So in this case, if I were to say, for example, oh, well, I'm going to copy the bannerman, he would become a bannerman, and therefore I can do my combo here. Now again, you have to copy a character that you have. So I can't say, oh, well, this is a Naishi because there's none in my game. Also, of course, a ninja can't copy a torii gate or a rice field. He can only copy characters, right? So there you have it. You now have all the info you need to be able to play Naishi. I hope you guys are going to enjoy the game. If you want to challenge me on Board Game Arena, I'm going to be playing a ton these next months. So I'll put my username on Board Game Arena somewhere around here on the screen. And I look forward to hearing what you guys think of Naishi. If you like this video, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel. I mean, I mostly do French content, so you wouldn't get much out of it. But if ever I make another game, I'm going to make another how to play video. So thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next time on another episode of